Thank you for following me through these intense YouTube studies, podcasts that you're joining us along, coming along with us week after week. My name is Arabin Lyman Hanavi, and the entire hour and a half long study is given over to two main topics. The first topic being eschatology, a biblical study of end time events, which we're going to embark on here shortly. And the second topic, if you're able to make the entire study, is entitled A Trinitarian Response to Biblical Unitarianism. It's kind of a spin-off of my earlier kind of channel series, YouTube playlist series entitled Exploring the Shema, Discussions on the Issues of Trinity. So it's really an apologetics study on Trinitarian verses, and currently we're working our way through Psalm 110 verses 1 really kind of down to 5. And so if that grabs your interest, then stick around for the entire hour and a half long study. All right, let's jump into the eschatology study. As you can see on your screen right now, there's topic 1 through 6 that's already kind of grayed out. We already hit all those topics, and we're presently in topic 7, Excursus, the Islamic Antichrist per Joel Richardson. And we're entertaining this discussion about the Antichrist man and his beast system that's going to rise up in the last days and represent a final rebellious effort to throw off God and God's Messiah and God's righteous words and God's truth, etc. So there are a lot of places in the Bible that describe this time period known as Daniel's 70th week, or the last 7 years of Daniel's prophecies that are found in Daniel 9:24 through 27. Go back and read that on your own. We studied that in topic 4 and 5. And also, as we're working our way towards the book of Revelation, you can see on your screen topic 15 and 16, we're working our way using the scriptures that are already set in place for us, kind of in the order that the Bible lays them down. So you can see, as you look at the topics, we started with the Old Testament prophecies first, topic 4, 5, 6, etc. And then we're working our way towards topic 8, 9, and then ultimately towards 15 and 16. So we're eventually going to get through all of it, the Yeshua's Olivet Discourse in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I don't have the topic on here, but I might add it later. We'll go through Paul's letters to the Thessalonians, because those are eschatological topics as well. So I hope you're enjoying the study. I'm certainly getting a lot of lively feedback from the YouTube comments. I don't expect everyone to agree with my perspective. Right now, we're talking about the Islamic Antichrist model. I've got a lot of pushback on that, which is healthy. It's healthy. It's good to have people who say, no, it can't be an Islamic Mahdi or the 12th Imam. It's not going to, that doesn't make sense. It's clearly somebody out of Europe. It's clearly King Charles, or it's somebody from America. It's Trump, or, something like that. So I'm used to that type of interaction. I think it's great because it means you're thinking. Right? If you're just guys are rolling over and accepting everything I say without challenging anything, then I'm thinking, are you using your thinking brain? Or are you just going to accept anything that some internet guy says on his YouTube channel? Right? Don't do that. So I'm glad that I'm getting some Bereans out there who are what do we say? Today's terminology, we say fact checking what I'm saying. So I'm fine with that. All right. So let's jump into where we left off with Joel Richardson's book, The Islamic Antichrist. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it online at his own website and at other resources. Look in the descriptions of these videos. I put the links there for some helpful resources through the book of Revelation, Daniel, eschatology, as well as direct links to Joel Richardson's book on Amazon, or directly from a site for free like I'm using right now. Or this other resource, which is answeringislam.org, also has a version of his book uploaded in HTML version, which is the one we're following right now on your screen, the one you see. And then lastly, there are multiple videos about Islam's role in the last days, and I'll say this and then I'll just jump into the study. And one of those videos is done by my good friend and partner in crime, as you could call us, Rabbi Eduardo Arroyo from Beth El Gibor Messianic Congregation in Pennsylvania. It's kind of like my home away from home synagogue. And so he did a video that I have also linked to in the description below, giving a little plug for him. The first kind of 20 minutes of his hour-long show or whatever, he's given over to talking about this Islamic Antichrist concept also. So, all right, let's jump right into the study, and I'll do my best not to stop and meander as much. I'll just kind of let the study speak for itself, and I'll only interject when I feel it's necessary. We're backing up just into the quote from the book of Ezekiel, was where we left off last week, so we can now then get Joel Richardson's running commentary on this particular passage. So this is the book of Ezekiel describing the Antichrist using the title Gog of Magog. Magog is a place, and Gog is the name of a ruler, like a title for a ruler, like Pharaoh of Egypt, Gog of Magog. I don't think his name is Gog, but his title is Gog, and he is portrayed in the book of Ezekiel, and then his name or his title of an individual who is a wicked puppet who's utilized by Satan. He shows up again at in the book of Revelation towards the very, very end, like in the 20s or like 20, 21, 22. I can't remember. I think it's maybe 20 or something. But so Gog is this antichrist figure. He's a puppet ruler for Satan. So you have to kind of keep that in your mind as you're reading through these prophecies. Satan is the ultimate one who's pulling the strings behind Antichrist, but Antichrist is the visible representation of Satan's leadership here on earth. So we could almost think of Antichrist as Satan incarnate. I don't know if Satan has that power to do what God can do, which is manifest himself as a man, like God manifests himself as Christ. But if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. Satan gives all of his authority to this man, this evil man. So let's read about him. This is a prophecy that Ezekiel speaks of Gog. I mean, we're talking about thousands of years before the end time Antichrist man will actually hit the scene. God foretold of some of his activities, and we gain our understanding of the future event by reading the past prophecies. That's the way we interact with our Bible prophecy in terms of end time events, is to read what the Bible says that's going to happen, because God knows the future from the beginning. You, Gog, which is Ezekiel's name for the Antichrist, Joel says, you will go up and you will come like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land, you and all your troops and many peoples with you. Notice the very in your face, not hidden from anyone's perspective, but the military aspect of Antichrist when he finally hits the scene. You'll come up like a storm, you'll like a cloud covering the land, you and all your peoples, and your troops. These are like military terms that are being borrowed here. It's not talking about some peaceful parade. It's not a pride march that Ezekiel's describing here, or any such thing. This is clearly a military campaign that's being described. I believe it's a description of what Bible students call the Battle of Armageddon, that we're going to see it towards the end of the 7th week of Daniel. It's also pictured for us in the book of Revelation. So Ezekiel continues, thus says the Lord God, it will come about on that day. Now pause. What day? Remember I mentioned when you're reading through Old Testament prophecies, a lot of the prophecies that are describing future events as they culminate in the final wicked, rebellious push of humanity to reject God and God's Messiah, Yeshua, and God's truth, which is the gospel and the word of God itself. Humanity is going to come to a maturation process. My good friend in the Skype class right now, he and I were dialoguing about this before the class. The Bible describes a time in Earth's history when at the very end there'll be almost like the culmination of humanity's history. The time is coming to a close, drawing to a close. We're in the final act where humanity is going to make one last ditch effort to throw off God and his righteous ways and raise their middle finger high in the air against God in a kind of rebellious gesture to say, raising their fist, which is found in the Old Testament, the Bayad Ramah principle that I described to my friend here. And it's going to be led by this man known as Antichrist. And so when God describes this event in the Old Testament, there are terms like on that day or in that at that time, or so it's a specified day when it says on that day or at that time. This is the end times. It's not just a single 24-hour day, so don't have that confusion. It's a time period that's given over to specified events to which there will never be a repeat of these specific events. So it's a defined chapter of human history that we're looking at here. And the day is actually shorthand for the day of the Lord, or that day of the Lord. So this is a term that's found in multiple places throughout the Tanakh, and it carries over into the Apostolic Scriptures writings. The day of the Lord, or the Lord's Day, if you want to borrow John's terminology in the book of Revelation, the day of the Lord is a day of judgment against wicked humanity and against the Antichrist and his beast system. So it's a day of judgment primarily, but it's initiated, according to my understanding of end-time prophecy, it's initiated by the rapture, which is a day of deliverance for the saints, deliverance from the wrath of Satan. So it's the 70th week, but not all of the 70th week. I'll put a little graphic on the screen in post-production for those of you who are watching this YouTube video. The day of the Lord happens, according to my understanding, the day of the Lord happens in sometime after the midpoint of the 70th week, sometime in that last quarter of the 7-year time period that people like to call the 7-year tribulation, which I don't. But so that's the day. God says it will come about on that day. So the day of the Lord, and then specifically here, the Battle of Armageddon takes place in that same time frame of the day of the Lord, towards the very end of the day of the Lord, just before the millennial kingdom is really ushered in. It will come about on that day, Ezekiel says, or God says through Ezekiel, that thoughts will come into your mind, speaking of the Antichrist, and you will devise an evil plan. Watch this carefully. And you will say, I will go up against the land of unwalled villages. Where's that? That's in the Middle East. That's Israel. That's Jerusalem, the land of unwalled villages. Satan is going to inspire Antichrist to move against Israel in the last days in one final ditch effort to wipe her off the map. Because Satan realizes that if he can get rid of Israel, then he thinks that this will put a dent in God's plans to establish his righteous kingdom. Satan can read the Bible just like we can, and God has obviously had his favor on Israel, so Satan knows that Israel's favored. So he's going to do everything he can to attack her, to weaken her, to ultimately destroy her. And so he's going to use this wicked human. Once again, Satan's going to be inspiring him, but ultimately God is going to allow it. God is going to be in control. God is always in control. He never loses control. Even if God's allowing Satan to persecute the righteous peoples of the earth, persecute God's chosen ones like he is going to allow, ultimately God is in control, and therefore it's part of God's plan. It ultimately amounts to God's purposes. So God says, this Antichrist is given this thought, I will go against those who are at rest, that live securely, all of them living without walls and having no bars or gates. And I believe, and Joel's probably going to mention this as well, I believe the reason Israel is in this state of kind of peace and safety is because they've already made this deal with Antichrist earlier on at the beginning of the 7th week, kicking off the 7-year agreement, kicking off the 7th week itself. They've already made this peace agreement with Israel and her neighbors, her hostile Arab neighbors and Palestinian neighbors, and all of those who seek to destroy Israel and wipe her off the map. Antichrist is going to make a way so that there's some form of mutual non-aggression pact I don't know how all the details of whatever peace treaty is going to be on the books, but somehow Israel will get to the point where maybe the Iron Dome doesn't seem as necessary from her perspective, because it says she's living without walls and having no bars or gates. It's just a description of a kind of a posture of, hey, we're at peace now. Let's just kind of let all the international community into Israel and boost our economy and, boost tourism, and let's, let everybody come see the brand new shiny temple that we just rebuilt, because it will be rebuilt, or something to that effect. Let's let everybody participate in our greatest achievement of final peace in the Middle East, and that'll look that way for the first 3.5 years. But what does the Antichrist say? He's going to march up against them to what? To capture spoil and to seize plunder and to turn your hand. This is God telling Antichrist what's going to happen in advance, to turn your hand against the waste places which are now inhabited, right? Even the desert that surrounds Israel, right? The Jordan and places in the south, places that are largely given over to maybe desert area, like south of Jerusalem, Dead Sea and areas around there. There's not a lot of development out there, but with peace and safety, and with the help of the economy that the Antichrist is going to have access to, his immense global wealth and et cetera, and the resources pouring into Israel, then we'll be able to develop some of those desert areas. So waste places which are now inhabited, and he'll come against the people, and Joel agrees with me, Israelites, who are gathered from the nations, right? They're returning to Jerusalem, who have acquired cattle and goods. So it's a description of their economic how could we say, success, as it were, right? So Israel's going to be thriving from the first part of the week, the first part of the 7th week. Everything will be looking good. In fact, the rest of the world will also probably be experience unprecedented global rest and peace. And this, at the same time, these times will be signaled by some disturbing wars and rumors of wars. The first seal rider comes in on a white horse, and he's carrying a bow but no arrows, and yet it's the beginning of birth pangs that Yeshua describes in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So it's really the beginning of the end, but it's the calm before the storm, right? If the world looks out at the skies and says everything looks fine. Blue skies, gentle breeze, the birds are singing, the crickets are chirping, every the flowers are doiling, or what do they do? What does Solomon describe? They spinning, or whatever. Yeah, everything looks good, but really it's the calm before the storm, because once the midpoint hits, that's when the storm hits, and that's when all hell breaks loose. So Ezekiel finishes by saying all these people who live at the center of the world. He's simply describing the epicenter of the world's activities, being there in the Middle East with this Antichrist figure, making sure that everything's kind of hunky-dory, so he can set Israel up for the kill, right? He can set the Middle East up for his worldwide domination. And if this is an Islamic Antichrist, well then, at the beginning of the 7th week, Israel's probably not going to be feeling any threat from Islam. They won't be thinking that there's any kind of threat from this religious leader who is actually Antichrist. And yet, by the midpoint of the week, then things are going to change drastically. So that was a quote from Ezekiel 38, verse 9 through 12. Okay, let's read Joel Richardson's commentary from this passage. According to the Bible, Joel says, after this attack, right? What attack is he talking about? He's talking about around the midpoint of the week that Antichrist is going to turn his sights on Israel for the purpose of making them his headquarters. So he's going to have to get rid of the Jewish presence there. He's going to have to desecrate the temple, and we know he's going to, right? That's the abomination of desolation that Daniel prophesied about in his book, that Yeshua warned us about in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Olivet Discourses, and that Paul also mentioned, where he talks about the man of lawlessness taking his seat in the temple, declaring himself to be God, and in opposition to every object of worship or so-called God, declaring himself to be God. This is the midpoint event of the week. This is the abomination of desolation. This will be followed very shortly, or maybe even after, so sometime closely related to this abomination, there will be some type of military campaign against Jerusalem that many Bible teachers describe as the Jerusalem campaign, one of three kind of major campaigns, military attacks, right there centered around the Middle East, and the names are borrowed from the locations that we see in the Bible. So according to the Bible, after this Jerusalem campaign, the Antichrist will specifically set up his throne in God's temple. And so let's read what the Apostle Paul talks about in the books, in his letters to the Thessalonians. And this is what I was alluding to earlier. He, speaking of Antichrist, will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. So that's 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Notice that this passage just it predicts certain events in relation to certain details that currently and presently don't seem to be either possible or allowable. Number one, there's no Antichrist that we're aware of yet, although he could be living in today's age. I mean, we're very, very close, it appears to me. I sense, and as do other prophecy students and teachers, that we're very, very close to these events taking place. A lot of the key players are already in place. Israel being back in her land, obviously. The Temple Mount being currently occupied by Islamic and Muslim artifacts, right? The Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I sometimes get that wrong. I think it's Al-Aqsa or Aqsa. I can't remember. Aqsa, A-K-S-A? Aqsa, A-S-Q-A? One of the two. But there's two holy shrines up on the Temple Mount right now, which seems to spell conflict for Israel, right? There's a problem there. But Paul was shown by the Spirit that there must be something up there that allows Israel to resume animal sacrifices and allows for Satan's puppet Antichrist to go inside and to desecrate. It says he sets himself up in God's temple. But as Tim Hagg is reminded in his own studies, the language that both Paul uses as well as Daniel when they're talking about this time period, both in the Hebrew and the Greek, or Aramaic, it depends. There could be just maybe either a smaller structure, doesn't have to be like a full-blown temple, could be a smaller portable type of altar where you can lay an animal up there and do the sacrificial ritual and then move it to a different location or something. Doesn't have to maybe be permanent. Or it could be just an area of the Temple Mount itself that is given over to this particular Jewish practice. But either way, currently no Jewish religious activities are allowed on top of the Temple Mount. There's these Muslim women that are kind of like lookouts for any Israelis who want to try and go up there, religious Jews, rabbis, whomever, want to go up there and maybe do some prayers, do their little afternoon prayers or start reading from their prayer book. There's these women that are dressed in black. You've heard of the men in black? Well, Islam has their women in black that are kind of like, they're not really spies, but they're lookouts, as it were. They kind of patrol the temple area and they watch for non-Muslims who might try to sneak up on the Temple Mount and do what they're not supposed to be doing. But eventually, some form of agreement between the Antichrist and Israel and her neighbors, including the Muslim religious side of the house, they're going to have to reach some agreement where something allows for what we're reading about right here in 2 Thessalonians to take place. Otherwise, Paul wasn't seeing things clearly.